I'm Tony Booth. I'm a long-standing Cambridge resident since 1976, so that's by far the longest I've ever lived anywhere. Well, I've been deeply involved in education for decades, and as an environmental campaigner, an environmental activist. I suppose I'm a kind of Jewish activist too, which it hadn't been so earlier, but because it became necessary to make clear that there was more than one Jewish voice about what was going on in this country and in the world, I became very active in a group which was then called, well, still called Jewish Voice for Labour, but we're about, hopefully, to change the name to Jewish Voice for Liberation. It gives completely the wrong message for people to see our voice as connected to the Labour Party, which many of us have been suspended from or otherwise expelled. Yeah, well, when I thought about the interview, then it came into my mind that in my cupboard I have a T-shirt which says "Let's talk about democracy," and it was my kind of feeble response to I think it was the royal wedding involving whatever their names are, Kate and what's his name? Anyway, they were getting married, and the press were full of it. People were going to have parties, and I thought, how can this be happening at this point in my life? When I was a child, I thought, oh, we've got this very old-fashioned and outdated phenomenon called a monarchy, but when I'm older, when I'm an adult, all this will have gone. We'll have a sort of more mature system, but it's never gone away. And that's just a small part of what I mean, what I think of as democracy. I just think it's an astonishing that everybody says we have a democracy, and democracy is incredibly important to them, and yet it's been systematically eroded. And anyway, nobody ever defines it. And that's why it's nice that you're doing this and encouraging conversations about it. So my T-shirt, Let's Talk, which says Let's Talk About Democracy, was my way on that day of having a very gentle prompt that I would wear it around the town and so on. And then people would say, oh, why are you wearing that? And then I could have a very gentle conversation. And the need for a very gentle conversation is because in this country, when you suggest for a moment that there could be changes to the democracy and maybe having a constitutional monarchy is not okay anymore, if people are so keen on the idea of democracy, actually people get quite violent, and you're in danger of being arrested for challenging the idea that there should be some alternative, some evolution, some development. I'll give you one tiny example. One of the things I worked on has been a way of thinking about the development of schools and education systems. I created 2,000 challenging questions about the development of schools. And I was about to type a question about democracy, and my fingers were shaking because I thought, if I put this in, somebody is going to complain, launch a complaint. But then I thought, this is ridiculous. This is a question this is art trying to ask questions about the everyday, what should be being discussed every day. And I think the question is, do teachers and students understand that a constitutional monarchy is merely a step in the process of development of a more mature democracy? The point was, I thought, I cannot ask this, which is astonishing. I mean, given I'm somebody who's always ready to challenge authority. And the same went for this T-shirt, that I had to think, well, how can I do something quite gentle? Because if you challenge people's thoughts about that aspect of the system, But I think that hardly touches the idea of what I mean by democracy. And I just, for me, democracy is about participation. I mean, participation is at its heart, but participation connects with all sorts of other ideas, and participation and equality are very close because without equality, you get very little participation. And I would see democracy as quite closely related to the idea of participation, but also to other values. So democracy is like, as other values, is a part answer to the question, how should we live together? That question isn't answered by saying, oh, in a democratic system. That's just a part of it. So maybe depending on your values, you have all sorts of other connected elements of this system. And for me, one way I summarize my ideas is through the idea of socialism. But it's quite useful to start thinking what other values are an important part of the answer to that question. Well, I developed a system of 16 interlocking, interconnected values, such things as beauty and joy and love and sustainability and courage and trust, community and equality and rights. Because I devised this system of values for how you might think about the detail of practice within an education system. But it's within a society, the detail of interaction. And as I started adding to it, I mean, I added to it through sort of process, which was to talk with people in maybe hundreds, maybe some thousands of people in different places around the world about education. And at one point, like in Mexico, I was in Mexico and it was a young audience, and somebody said, "Well, you haven't got love. Why haven't you got love in your framework?" And I said, "Well, it's probably because I'm English." And but they said, "Well, it should be part of this framework." So I included that. I also wanted to say about participation, it has these two elements. There's activity, which is people doing things together, things that you do. But there's no participation without a participating self. Knowing you can't participate unless you are yourself. You can't participate because you speak somebody else's words. And that's a struggle. You have to learn how to be yourself and act for yourself and take responsibility for yourself. And then you become, then you can be a participant, or then you are a participant. Nobody's ruled out, everybody's in. Not everybody participates if they're doing it because they feel forced into it or they're under the spell of some powerful person. And that's again where equality comes in because people don't participate freely unless they're an equal participant. Well, I think that we contribute most to a democracy by being ourselves, actually, and supporting others to be themselves, to be this kind of participant. I mean, when I was a young man, I was doing a course, I was becoming an educational psychologist, and so one of the people running the course said, "You walk around as if you own the place." And I said, "I hope I walk around as if everybody owns the place." And I think that's what you try and communicate. If this is ours, it's like being at the station and some bloke coming out and saying, "You can't hand out leaflets here. This belongs to the railway company." And I would think, it's nice. Thank you for your opinion about who it belongs to, but I have a different opinion. I think that this station, this area, the platforms still belong to the people. They belong to all of us. You have fundamental beliefs, you develop the confidence to have fundamental beliefs, and then you try and live them out to some extent. So you know how it is. It's a way when you put on an event, it's always an event where you try for everybody to feel that they are important, they make a contribution. A particular thing has happened in Cambridge is that those people who have that share those the value that everybody's important here, and we don't have a hierarchy amongst us, and we give freely of the skills that we have. It sort of keeps you, it's what keeps you going, is this idea that there is this network of people who want us to be able to live together in a way that supports each other, that recognizes each other's needs. There were beautiful things about the what happened last Saturday, which is the action to end the prescription of Palestine action, but it's really not an action to end the prescription of Palestine action. It's an action to end the genocide in Palestine. I didn't sit on last Saturday because I'd done it before, and just but we were all checking up on who had heard what about our dear ones who were sitting there, and we were waiting for them to be released. Anyway, I don't know if I contribute to a democracy, but part of this weirdness about the cultural attitude towards democracy. On the one hand, it's said to be one of the things that we value most, and yet it's one of the things that we value the least. I suppose I just grew up knowing that everybody, every life and every death was of equal value. I mean, nothing else makes any sense. The idea that, some baby born in this place of this person is of less importance and significance than a baby born to this person in another place. I mean, it's interesting how once that hits you, it's kind of not something you give up easily. And I suppose that's the foundation of democracy is a deep valuing of the worth of everybody. Well, we don't have a democracy. We have a few things which are called activities which are kind of part of something that might be called a democratic system. We have a few aspects of a democratic system, and we have aspects of an undemocratic or anti-democratic system. And on the balance, they're probably more prevalent. They make up more of the system. And of course, capitalism is a deeply anti-democratic economic system because it's constantly creating inequality. It's giving livelihood and it's taking away livelihood. And especially in this last stage of capitalism, where it's taking away the possibility of life on this planet. It's in its last stage, in my view. I can't see, I mean, unless there's a dramatic turnaround, and the dramatic turnaround cannot be a capitalist turnaround. The turnaround is a turning away from capitalism. And that's a truth that is dawning on all sorts of people from all sorts of directions. So the fault line is the economic system, which is part of the way in which inequality is created. And once you've created inequality, it perpetuates itself because there are so many people want to hang on to their positions of privilege, and they want to hang on to the system which has supported their position. A democratic system in which people participate freely is also very joyful. And I think and it's beautiful. So I think that's the only way it will work. There's a phrase from I think it's in The Idiot, in Dostoevsky's The Idiot. I think it is. And one of the characters says, if there's one thing that will save the world, it's beauty. And we don't really need much. I mean, I talk about an economics of sufficiency is the only way that you can create a democracy and that it can survive. And if you call that it doesn't matter whether you call that a socialist system or not. You can call it what you like. You can call it a democratic system if you like, but it's in which you kind of understand that there is a way of thinking about how we live together such that it's a deeply satisfying experience for many, many, many more people than the system that we have now.